Good evening and welcome to our last Huddy Hui for 2022. And what a way to finish off. We've got a real legend of Rugby Sevens, and his name is very synonymous with the game. Sir Gordon Tietjens is our guest on the Hui tonight. Titch, many thanks for coming on the Huddy Hui. Your thoughts on the Hong Kong Sevens last weekend, the first time in about 2 years it's been on. Were you surprised by how New Zealand finished up, in particular the match against your Samoan team?
Obviously disappointing that we, for the first time ever, we didn't hit the Cup Championship in the quarterfinal. So effectively on day two, you just can't win the Hong Kong Sevens. And I suppose if I go right back to when my career started, that was my very, very first tournament. Was one tournament a year. It was the Hong Kong Sevens, and that was the tournament that we all wanted to win, and probably the one that I love the most, if I was to be honest. So to see the guys not obviously get put out, and a pretty tough draw, to be fair, with Samoa, Australia, and themselves. One of them had to fall, and unfortunately it was us. And but again, Hong Kong also produces surprises, and we saw Australia beat Fiji in the final, who were looking to win their sixth Hong Kong in a row.
And you mentioned that was your first ever tournament going back to 1983. You played for the New Zealand Sevens team.
Played for them in '83, and we lost to Samoa in the quarterfinals. So but I always remember scoring a try. So how's that? So, but my first time there as the All Black Sevens coach was in '94.
'94.
Yeah, that we introduced Jonah as an 18-year-old. We had a pretty good side, and we beat. I remember beating Fiji in the semis, and we beat Australia. Had some very good players at that time in the final.
3 weeks ago, I met you at the tournament that's named after yourself, the Sir Gordon Tietjens Sevens tournament, played out at Palmerston North. How did that idea come around with you being given the naming rights for that tournament?
Yeah, well, John Kendall at that time was one of the teachers at Palmerston North Boys High, and was really looking to promote the game of sevens. And I took my team there when I was coaching the All Black Sevens. We used to assemble many times in Palmerston North, and I took them to the school. And obviously my relationship with John, I coached him when he was a player for the Baipuni Steamers, and it sort of built from there. And he put this idea together. Would you mind if we named a sevens tournament after yourself? And it was pretty humbling to be asked that question. And of course I said yeah. And for unfortunately, really in some ways, it's the first year that I've ever been able to attend it. I've generally had to send someone on my behalf. So, it was really exciting to be there, and I really enjoyed it. And I was actually, it's not being disrespectful, but it was certainly a lot more competitive than I thought. I was a little bit in the dark going into the tournament, but boy, she was pretty competitive, and some very good sides there, and potentially some very good players.
You mentioned that you played your rugby for Bay of Plenty. Let's tell us about your rugby career. Where did it all begin for you, and what position did you play?
Well, I suppose it began as a rugby started for me as a 5-year-old, playing on Frosts and Rotorua for St Michael's, and I just loved rugby, loved sport in general, I suppose, and then went right through and made some younger reps teams coming through. And first 15, I was first 5'8" for Rotorua Boys High. I was a 10, and a 15, I kicked goals. So hacker at that time, and then I played my first senior game as an 18-year-old, and I decided I wanted to move from being a 10 or a fullback to be a flanker and a number 8. So that was where I went, and that's where I stayed. And of course, made the Bay of Plenty side as an 18-year-old and played 3 games, then went off to the UK and played for London Welsh. And I really enjoyed it over there. It's where I first learned about sevens. And then coming back, played for Bay of Plenty, went on to play 86 games for the Bay, and had a season for Waikato under George Simcoe, and played 14 games, and we toured Australia in 83. Lucky enough to play a number of internationals. The game I probably remember the most was the Player of the Day against South Africa for Bay of Plenty. We just lost to them, I think, about 26-24 in 1981. In that infamous tour, I suppose, of New Zealand, and never forget that game. And I've played against Australia, and that was probably the most pleasing result, because Australia were touring New Zealand, hadn't been beaten. the David Campeses and the Chris Roaches and all those types of players. And we beat them 40 points to 16. Ooh. And the previous weekend in provincial rugby, we'd been beaten by the Thames Valley. So how's that? Swamp Foxes beat us. Yeah. Graham Crossman is the coach. He said, well, there's really no sense in getting together the night before this particular international, which was quite out of the norm because you always assembled the night before an international. This particular time we didn't. They had no confidence in us. We assembled on the morning of the game, and we basically said, let's just run it from anywhere. And it was one of those games that everything ticked, and we beat South Africa 40 points to 16. And so that was a game I'll never forget. And then I managed to play against the Lions in 83 when they toured New Zealand for Waikato and Japan. And I played for Fiji, against Fiji over in Fiji. So had a few international games that I can still remember. And then, of course, after I finished playing, I got into the coaching game. And my first year coaching was coaching the Bapani Colts team, the Bapani out of 21s. And then from then on, I went to coach the Bapani Steamers. And I was coaching the All Black Sevens at that particular time from 94 onwards. And then I made a decision that I couldn't, stay coaching the Steamers as coaching Bapani. So I elected to pull out all the 15s and just concentrate and focus just purely on sevens. And that's where I stayed. And that's probably the best decision I ever made, really, to be fair.
When you came onto the scene as the head coach of the New Zealand Sevens team, you were in charge for 22 years. Tell us about that first season you took over the New Zealand Sevens team, and what was it like?
Yeah, I suppose I was, going in, I was a little bit, I suppose, not so much scared. I was apprehensive, really. I suppose, I was looked up to these Eric Rushes and the Dallas Seymours and the Glenn Osbornes and those types of players at that particular time, who were very, very good sevens players. And here I am. I was only 36, I think, years of age, and I'm coaching these guys. And so for me, it was really a massive step up to go into a team, coaching your national team, to go to Hong Kong. And but I was really, really lucky and fortunate to work with Eric Rush, who was a wonderful captain. So, of course, with Rushy, I put all these new protocols in place. I was pretty strict around what I wanted, not only in training but also in nutrition, and they had to make some big changes. And I'd put a lot of work into putting a lot of grids together that I felt were special to the game of sevens, that basically replicated what I wanted on the sevens field. And with that, obviously fitness has always been a big part of my growing up as an athlete when I played, and I expected that from my players. So I certainly was very, very firm in what my expectations were around fitness and conditioning. And of course, I felt at that time also that I thought sevens was a specialist game, that you just couldn't be a good 15s player and automatically be a good sevens player, because it didn't work that way. And I suppose the biggest challenge that I had was when I named my team for Hong Kong, and I came from the Bay of Plenty, and I named Martin Jones from Bay of Plenty, Joe Ta'iwi from Bay of Plenty, and Peter Woods from Bay of Plenty, and I suppose I was going to always get a little bit of criticism but I felt they were seven specialists, and here I was naming a Joe Ta'iwi ahead of Graham Bishop, who was the All Black halfback. But Joe Ta'iwi was a tremendous sevens player. He had all his skill sets. And, of course, we won Hong Kong 94, 95, 96 with all those players. So it justified, I suppose, that's what I had to do. Those guys were, I mean, it was in the media, who are these three guys, and they were all new, but they were very, very good sevens players and played a number of games for New Zealand by the time they'd finished their time with the All Black Sevens team. So, yeah, those were the challenges, but I came out of it on top in some ways, because we won Hong Kong. And 94, 95, of course, was the Christian Cullen's first year. I'll never forget that, because he played one game against Chinese Taipei, scored the very first try, and that was his game for the tournament. He just sat on the bench and watched everyone else. And of course, in the next year, in 96, he was the superstar. the guy that scored 18 tries in Hong Kong alone. And for those people that can remember that wonderful game against Fiji in the final where he was running across the goal mouth and came out through the goalpost and put Waisaki Mazarewa away for a try that, a lot of people will remember forever. So that was those 3 special years that, my first 3 years. And of course, then 96 was our first Rugby World Cup, and we lost. We got beaten in that, but it was pretty tough. We lost to, I think it was South Africa in the semis. But we then went on after a while to win a World Cup and win some Commonwealth Game gold medals and a lot of World Series, which was obviously being that successful. I suppose I owed so much to the players that were around me, and I suppose the biggest challenges I had at that particular time was I was the only selector at that particular time, so I covered the country to find the best players I had, because Sevens dropped in terms of their recognition, in terms of there used to be a priority, I suppose. We had a preference, but that fell away once Super Rugby got underway. So therefore, if you were the All Black Sevens coach, you had to wait till the All Blacks were named. You had to wait till the rugby teams for squads were named. You then wait for the New Zealand Māoris to get named. Then you waited for the New Zealand under-21s to get named. And then you had what was left after that. So there were some big, big challenges around selection. But that was what I felt I was pretty good at, to find the players out there that could really get out and deliver the goods for you, that weren't being utilised by the bigger teams, if you like.
Eric Rush, you mentioned, of course, you have a lot of time for him. Tell us about his leadership in those early days of the Sevens team, because his influence has carried over the years to come.
Yeah, well, he commanded a huge amount of respect, and because when I took over the team in '94, it's always about creating a culture first and foremost, and you need someone to lead that as well, and of course, and it always comes from the top. And Eric Rush was a massive part of that. Because why? Because he was inspirational. He commanded so much respect, and he worked particularly hard. And he was one of the players that, and I say worked, at 39 years of age, he was still playing for the All Black Sevens team and still right up there in the conditioning stage with all the other players. So, yeah, but just his manner, and what what the jersey meant to him, even though he was a fully fledged All Black as well, an All Black winger, but he loved the game of sevens. And even, we had just recently, we had a reunion before they went off to the Olympics a little while ago. And of course, when all the players met, all the past players and present were there, it was like they'd never ever left, and then those are the memories that you'll always retain, and what they got up to. There was a lot of stuff that they got up to that I had no idea, even though I was the coach, so it all came out on this particular evening. So it was a lot of fun. But one thing that they did, all these players, when I was coaching the team, they'd always empty the tank for you, and because they just loved the environment of what we brought to the table in terms of our culture. Jonah loved the sevens environment. He would come back any day of the week to play sevens, and I'd have to be honest, he always played well for the All Blacks if he came out of a sevens camp, because he was sharper. And for someone as 118 kgs when he started with me, 18 years of age, and 1.51 over standing 10, incredible with a step and everything. So, and he never, it's funny when we talk about Jonah, he never once lost in the All Black Sevens jersey. He won obviously a gold medal in Kuala Lumpur in '98. He won a World Cup in 2000 and Europe. It's in Mar del Plata in South America. He won Hong Kong Sevens in those 3 years, 94, 95 and 96. So incredible, really. And it's a record that can never be matched. And it was just huge. And he sometimes, at the odd time, he was released from the All Blacks to come to a couple of tournaments for the All Blacks. And we always won when he was there as well. So, never forget those memories and what he gave to the team, because it was just simply outstanding.
You mentioned the World Cup in 2001, and Eric Rush went down with a broken leg. And that
Yeah.
final, was that considered, you would probably consider to be one of John Olomu's great games representing New Zealand?
Oh, yeah, those can remember him running over the guy Cat in the World Cup for the All Blacks. You can always remember that. Well, he did similar that to them in the final. I mean, when any player left the All Black Sevens environment for whatever reason, in this case, Rushy had broken his leg, they always had to perform a haka before they boarded the bus or the taxi to go out to the airport to fly home. And in Rushy's case, he had to fly home. It was quite a serious break, and he couldn't stay back for the day of the final, which was so leaving the morning of our final, our semi-quarterfinal against Argentina. Jonah led this haka in the foyer, because Russia's on crutches or a wheelchair, and it was so inspirational. There was my team talk going into the last 3 games to win our first ever Rugby World Cup, and never forget that. But it was just the emotion, with all the players led by Jonah at that particular time, which basically said everything. And obviously, to me, it was a big part of us going on to win that cup.
You won 12 World Series on the HSBC World Series circuit. What was your best victory as coach?
On the circuit, you always remember your first, funny enough, your first World Series. And here we were, and if Fiji had won their quarterfinal, they'd won the World Series. That's how close it was. Fiji lost to Argentina in the quarterfinal. Never forget it. So then word got back that Fiji had lost. So if we won our next 3 games, it was in France, that we'd win our first ever, and that was how we won our first ever World Series. So that's probably one that you'll never forget. Games, if I looked over my career, the one I suppose the most satisfying for me was our convincing victory in 2013 to win our rugby, the World Cup. Russia, where we smashed England by 40-odd points. It was an incredible victory. We played so well, and they were coached at that particular time by Ben Ryan, who then coached Fiji. But I'll never forget that victory, and I had a very good side as well. I think, Commonwealth Games for me, one thing you never forget, and when you see a player up in the dais being presented with a gold medal to the tune of the anthem, to the raising of the flag, there's nothing better than that. And to have that happen 4 times is a pretty amazing. But it's not about sitting back and you go, here, it's such a proud moment. But it's when you reflect back, it's all the hard work that's gone into. It's not about one tournament, it's about all the work that's gone in behind the scenes, through all the management, through the conditioning trainers, through the coaches, and that, to get us to that point to actually perform on the world stage. And that, to me, was quite special. And I'll never replace those victories. It's like a World Cup, holding it up. But, it's just all the work that's gone into actually achieve that success.
Of course, for a long time, there was a certain circuit on that rivaled the Hong Kong Sevens, and that was the Wellington Sevens. For well over a decade, that rivaled Hong Kong, and it was up there as one of the go-to tickets. What do you think resulted in the decline of the Wellington Sevens, and can it return?
Yeah, I mean, people just couldn't get tickets to the Wellington Sevens when it was in New Zealand. I remember the first 3 years, I could have the cream of the crop. Really, I could have the Christian Cullens and that. But that particular time, because they hadn't been playing sevens, they would generally come off the bench. Because they weren't sevens conditioned, and people used to look at me quite strangely, or the papers would climb into me, and why is it just not starting Cullen? But it takes you so long to get back into the game. And we didn't win Hong Kong for those first 3 or 4 years in Wellington. We didn't win Wellington in those first 3 or 4 years. But once we started winning it, we were the most successful team in Wellington. We obviously the pressure, the extra added pressure was always tough, but it attracted the crowds, and just people dressed up. Just a great week, Wellington Cup week, same time. It was just a massive week, and people come from anywhere and everywhere to go to the Wellington Sevens. Just getting tickets. I can't remember how many tickets I was trying to organise for people. I just phone calls, emails, just all right through the country. Can I get tickets? Can I get tickets? And it stayed that way in Wellington. Then, of course, Hamilton, probably it's going to take a while to match Wellington, to be fair. I felt it was the ideal city for the New Zealand Sevens tournament. Not being disrespectful to Hamilton, Auckland, or wherever, but I still believe it's the best place, the best ground. Everything's so close, and obviously, but they had made those changes. They moved it to Hamilton now, and I've been to the Hamilton tournament there a couple of times. But it's still not anywhere near as supported as what Wellington was. It's dropped off in terms of the numbers that go there, but there's still a good atmosphere because New Zealand's playing.
Your training sessions are well known to be brutal and legendary. Can you describe one of those training sessions for us? And I believe that in 2011 you punished the All Blacks.
Oh, yeah, I trained the All Blacks in 2011 when I was asked by Graham Henry. And, yeah, at that time, would I put the loose forwards and the backs through a sevens training session, if you like. And
I'll just excuse you there, Gordon. You just got your hand on the camera. So there you go.
Sorry.
That's right. Yep.
Sorry, I could put the All Blacks through a sevens training session as I would with my players, I suppose. Just give me what you do with them. Just give it to my players. And it was a real challenge because I suppose I challenged them mentally because I had them fatigued at times. And then with fatigue comes you hope, accurate decision making. And in some cases, for some players that weren't at the levels they needed to be, the decision making wasn't the best because that's where you're challenged, in big moments, and when you hold the ball on for numbers of phases. And I always remember Sitiveni Siviatu. He got the ball in a 4-on-2 situation, I suppose it was, and he took it into contact. I remember blowing the whistle and say, stop, put the ball back in City's hands and said, read the picture. And he knew what I was saying. It was a 4-on-2 and he took it into contact. But he was out of oxygen. He was just he was gone, So, and I suppose a normal training session, we would always test. We'd do beep tests, speed tests, decrement phosphate tests, which was 10, 30-metre sprints with 30-second recoveries at the fastest as you could. And then that was all in we'd start with the speed. We'd then do a decrement phosphate test, and then we'd do the beep test. And then we'd go and train. We'd spend another 30 minutes doing on the field doing some drills. And that was just the start of our camp week when we assembled, because we were never centralised then. So the players would all come in from wherever. I needed to test them. I needed to know the levels what they're at. And away we went. And the players never shirked it. Believe it or not. I always felt as a team we were connected through hard work, and it unified the team. That was who we were. That was the All Black Sevens team. And the number of tournaments I believe that we won in the last play of the games was incredible. And I certainly put that down to the conditioning levels of the players that I had at that particular time.
Food and nutrition you mentioned before, you were very tough on. Did the players ever try and sneak around your strict conditions?
I caught Carlton with all his popcorn stuffed up his bloody hoodie in Fiji, and I was, it was great. But I mean, you look at the fun times when that sort of thing happened. But I probably had the philosophy in the end was, mate, if you think you deserve an ice cream, have an ice cream. But unfortunately, the players that should have been having the ice creams were deserved an ice cream, So, but no, I'm a real believer that nutrition played a massive part in the success of our teams, because what it drove was consistency in the team, because I knew that everyone had been eating the right types of foods, whether it be at breakfast, whether it be during the tournament, post games, and that they were eating the right foods. We had great nutritionists within the New Zealand Union as well, and they backed me up 200% on what I believed in. That was one of the very first things I did. I met Jenny Pierce when I first was appointed in 94, and I talked to her about the importance of nutrition, and she was fantastic. she gave me every bit of advice and for the way to get the best out of the team. And I talk about players making sacrifices, but I don't really say it's a sacrifice. It's a choice. It's a choice. If you want to be the best you can be and get out and perform, with a consistency and have the energy levels, not be listless, lethargic, lack energy, then you'll go a long way. And I applied that in a team sense, and we were very, very good. Our players, to be fair, on the World Series, every venue that we went to early, not so much earlier on, but later on, the food was fantastic. And like at a Com Games, you knew every bit of the ingredients or whatever serving there was wherever you went into the food halls, so you knew how much carbohydrate, how much fat, how much protein. It was all there in front of you to read. So players, when they were picking out selecting their food, they'd been pretty, I suppose, they'd had so many lessons around nutrition and what was right and what was wrong for you. So you just trusted that they eat the right food, and as I said, it played a big part of our success.
Described as the greatest sevens coach of all time, how has your coaching influenced others coaches on the world circuit?
Say that again.
How has your coaching influenced others that have inspired by you?
Yeah, well, it's funny because we used to be when I was playing, I always remember I was a reserve one day for Waikato in Manawatu, and I was a reserve in the morning, and I thought I got up. I didn't feel too well, so I went for a run. And I down to a ground and just did some, just some straight outs and real good wake up, bit of a sweat up, went back. And funny enough, 2 minutes into the game, one of the flankers got injured. I was on, and I felt like I could run all day. So that from that time on, before any game I was playing, I would go out and run in the mornings, go for runs in the morning, come back, generate an appetite, have a good breakfast. And because when I went to the ground to play my club game or provincial game, I'd already woken the body up. I'd already been out for a run. I felt $1 million. So that was my mindset going into tournaments. So if we had our first game at 11 o'clock, I wanted my players to have a blowout at 8 o'clock, straight outs and everything, whether it be at the hotel or at a ground going to the actual ground. So we used to have players and teams standing back like, well, look at New Zealand, but every time we played our first game, it was our second game. We were it was too late. The other teams, we'd won the game in the first half. So believe it or not, after a couple of years, everyone started doing it. And everyone does it now, and I suppose they learn a lot from us. I caught two conditioning coaches from the England team in Manchester, up on a roof, videoing our training in a grandstand. Caught some on conditioning trainers and video analysis, videoing our trainings behind the hedges, and because at that time we were winning everything.
Yeah,
people were trying to, I suppose, look into what we did so well and why are we so good, and so therefore, as I said, we exposed a couple of teams trying to work out what we were doing and we were doing it. So it's I suppose they learned a lot. They learned about nutrition. Yeah, a lot of teams were quite really slack around nutrition. They'd be eating all the wrong types of foods.
Yeah,
even though some of these venues they had them out, and especially in the States when we first went there was hot dogs and sausages. But the food they had was all fried. It was terrible to start with.
Yeah.
But then World Rugby then got some nutritionists and put them on board, and then it started taking off in a better way than what it used to be, certainly from the start.
And of course, the Sevens now, the multiple teams can win any competition now. And of course, it became an Olympic sport. Do you think in 2016, a lot of teams had caught up by then when you went to Rio?
Oh, yeah. They definitely. I mean, in 2015, I flew to New Zealand Rugby and said that we needed to centralise. I could sense they were catching up.
Yeah.
When South Africa were in, they used to assemble as Stellenbosch. They were in Stellenbosch as a team then before us. Australia were in Sydney. They were there. They were getting better. The English team were basically centralised around London. They were in camps. They were training. So my thoughts to New Zealand were we need to centralise. because if I was a Super Rugby player and I lived in Mount Maunganui and I made the Highlanders, I couldn't live in Mount Maunganui and still play for the Highlanders. I had to move to Dunedin, and this is, but the mindset at that particular time, and why do we have to centralise? We're winning, aren't we? You know, and that to me was, it was just quite evident that.
Look, just lost Gordon's audio there. So,
what's happened here?
I can hear you now, Gordon. Just can't see you.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. If you can just keep talking, it'll be all good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know why it's just gone blank on me. I don't know why. So, I do, yeah.
Oh, there we go. Good.
Yeah. So, so obviously that was, and if I reflect back on the girls now, you know, with World Rugby, how our girls are going so well in the World Cup. I mean, they'd won previous World Cups, and I didn't feel that the New Zealand Rugby Unit were investing in women's rugby, and I suppose they had the same mindset as what they had with the Sevens team while we're winning, and because they had the English team and the French team went away and appointed, I suppose, professional rugby players, and put a lot of emphasis into being the best, and then we got exposed when we went on that tour of the Southern Hemisphere last year or 2 years ago, and now we're just getting back on track again and being the team we could be, but it was a real wake up call in Sevens, and also because we now centralised in Sevens and also for 15s, and I think the Rugby Union appointing Wayne Smith and Graham Henry for those roles to get those girls up to where they need to be was a magnificent appointment, and aren't they playing well? It's fantastic.
Leadership and values are very much part of your coaching career. What advice would you pass on to those that are playing rugby sevens and those outside of rugby?
Yeah, well, I'm a real believer. I've always been a coach that have been after you need to be a team player. You know, I've always maintained that. I always just said about any of my teams, there's always 7 captains. I'm always a believer that when I'm looking to select players, and sometimes you've got players equal in ability, I always look at the character, because with character they're very, very coachable, which is a huge ingredient. And I've always said that a big part of my culture was based on traditional values: honesty, respect, humility, discipline, good leadership. And those are the qualities that we need, you know, with the players that we have, because players certainly in the Sevens game, they have to, basically it's like signing a dotted line and signing a contract. You've got to be totally committed and be prepared to work very, very hard to achieve success. And if you want to utilise Sevens to be that pathway to going on to being successful, you know. And I mean, every player certainly has an aspiration, has a goal. And like at that Sevens tournament, I think I named Fletcher Carpenter, I think, is the player of the tournament. He's a young player, quite small in stature, but potentially could be the ideal Sevens player that could really see the Olympics as a long-term goal, you know. So therefore, I think even now he's got all the qualities to make it to there, you know, and also then later on perhaps make the steps up to the 15s game. But that's the commitment those players have to make, and have to, you know, you can't go in with two minds and think it's going to be easy, because it's not. I think commitment is all about achievement. If you commit yourselves, you go on to achieve, and then to become very successful. It's a hard grind, but it's an enjoyment one. But there's no shortcuts, and that's the key. It's about a lot of hard work, and it's funny. I've always used a philosophy that I loved. That was probably the most enjoyable aspect of my coaching career, was when I saw some of the Sevens players go on and make it into the All Blacks. And even now, if you look at the Rico Ioanis, the Akira Ioanis, the Adi Saviers, who all played wonderful for the Sevens, I get a real buzz. And I probably got a bigger buzz at them making the All Blacks than actually winning the tournament. Yeah. And it's so pleasing. And the number of those players that have come back to you and thanked you for your input or helping them get to where they've got to, which is, it's pretty pleasing when that happens.
What advice would you give to a young player finishing school and that are thinking of going on a sevens career?
Basically, what I just indicated, be prepared to work particularly hard, but don't go in. I think where there's some provinces and some people out there that'll try and steer them away from sevens for whatever reason. But I'm a real believer now. Your skill sets have to be right up there, identifying space, reading the pitches, and sevens can give you that, and knowing you're coming in to the sevens environment, you're going to be challenged, and you will work very, very hard. You're quite easily exposed on a sevens field. You get challenged defensively with your attacking nous as well, but it's such a great game to play, and particularly youngsters that have the attributes with some great skill sets. Sometimes you'd never ever know how quick a player really was. You'll see it in the sevens game, but you might never see it in the 15s games because our game is driven by defence. So the key for me is for a sevens player to say, I've got to make all these sacrifices. No, you've made a choice, and when you make that choice, you wholeheartedly, you've got to put everything into it to be successful. And I think that's my advice. Just don't go in two minds. Do I play 15? Commit yourself to one. And if you commit yourself to sevens, be prepared to work particularly hard. And what I will say is, too, my training used to be harder than any game they'd play. So the games were easy. So it's getting, as I said, that hard work. We were connected through hard work. And it's like us. If we go out for a run and we come back with sweated profusely, feel $1 million, that's how I want you to feel, and that's how you feel in the All Black Sevens team when you've come through on the back out of those hard trainings.
Down here in Wellington, particularly this year in our secondary school comps and in our Wellington Sevens, we've had a drop away in teams. What do you think could possibly change or get the motivation for numbers to come back into tournaments down this way?
I think there's so much on sometimes. And I mean, the biggest drive around, I think, being successful at club levels and getting the clubs up is the people at the top, when you name your coaches and your assistant coaches and your managers, it's being really going out to the players and being really well organised and structured around your trainings, everything. Doesn't matter whether it's from the apparel side of it, just the organisational side, having good conditioning trainers, having good physios, and being so well organised, then you'll easily put together very, very good teams. And I think that is the real key. When you think, and you're going to use sevens just as a game to get fit for 15s, then some will turn up to training, some won't. So you're going in half-heartedly into some tournaments, and in some cases you haven't even got the numbers. So I think to be successful in these sevens tournaments and to drive the teams up, you've got to start a lot earlier, get the squads going, do your pre-season training for sevens rugby, and then attack the tournaments, going there to win them, because in any one of those tournaments there's generally a selector around, and New Zealand has a few selectors around the country. It might be just the tournament that you're in and part of that team that might put your name out there to be a contender to go and play for the All Black Sevens team. Who knows?
Now you've stopped coaching Samoa. What do you do with your time now, Titch?
Well, I'm a brand ambassador for our sportswear company, Legion Sportswear, and the people that own Legion Sportswear are based in Adelaide, Australia, and we have a factory in Shanghai. So I'm out there promoting the Legion Sportswear. So I'm actually wearing a Legion shirt right this very minute, actually, and it's that's the star right up there, and it's going really well. We produce a lot of really sporting apparel, and it's going extremely well. A lot of rugby sports clubs are using all our gear, and so I'm spending my time doing that really, and playing a lot of tennis, and which I play my tennis 2 or 3 times a week, which I need to do, and I'm pleased about. But then at the same time, I'm out there talking to a lot of people that are involved in a lot of sport. And I go to Palmerston. We supply Palmerston North Boys High with all their sporting apparel. Palmerston North Intermediate with sporting apparel, so it's quite good. And going right around the island, I suppose, is in the Bay of Plenty especially. There's a lot of clubs that are now contracted using all our gear.
We'll finish up with this last question. your greatest New Zealand Sevens team of all time, and why?
If these guys were at their very, very best and I put this team out to play, it was my dream team when I reflect back. And that could have changed in a small way, I suppose, with the way players have come through now. But at that particular time, up to 2016, I had Eric Rush and Dallas Seymour, who were incredible war horses, I suppose. So Rushy as the leader. Dallas Seymour, he was nicknamed Nails. He was just fast, hard, understood the game, and just one of the real unsung heroes of my team. And my other forward was Liam Messam, who Commonwealth game gold medals as well. And he was good. See, you get it quite easy throwing Artie Stavier in there as well, Akira Ioane if you wanted to. And then you've got your halfback was your Mosio Valence Royoma. He won 3 Commonwealth game gold medals as a 17-year-old, was his first in Kuala Lumpur in 98. And then you've got Tamasi Sama, who was unbelievably good, as well. I mean, incredible, really. And then you've got Carl Tanana commentating quite frequently on the Sevens tournaments, and also is a good commentator, actually, I have to say. He goes very, very well. And he was as a 10 or a first, he was fantastic for me, really fit. Also captained my team, led them extremely well. The midfield was Christian Cullen, without pair, and of course the big boy was out in the wing, Jonah. So that was the 7. But in saying that, there's a lot of players. Even Bodine Barrett had a couple of tournaments in the team, and how good could he have been if he'd managed to be given a few more tournaments, which he could have been fantastic. I mean, he would have been, no question. Ben Smith won a gold medal in Delhi in 2010. They were all great players within their rights, but they were only given limited time to play the game.
Yeah.
So that team that I gave you, Rush, Seymour, Messam, Tanana, Mosio Valence, Royoma, Cullen, and Loma would have been a tremendous team if they had the rights to go out and play as a team.
Well, Sir Gordon, it's been fantastic having you on the Huddy Hui, and all the best for the rest of the year, and hopefully we'll catch up with you later on.
Yeah, beauty, Huddy. Cheers, mate. Thank you very much. Awesome. Thank you, buddy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, Sir Gordon Tietjens, our guest on the Hui tonight for our final ever episode. We'd also like to thank our sponsors for this year, Mike Pinfold Plumbing and Drain Laying, and Louise Reddy of NZ Travel Brokers, and hopefully we'll have them back on board again next year as well. And just to confirm, we'll also be streaming the Wellington Ambassadors Sevens this Saturday at Trent Memorial Park, so watch out for that this Saturday. So we'll be back with the Huddy Hui the week 1 of the Swindell Shield for 2023. We've already got our first guest of the year locked in already. Can't tell you yet. You'll find out in the first week, which will mostly be around late March, early April. So that is the Huddy Hui for 2022. We look forward to being back with you all next year in 2023. Otherwise, have a safe Christmas and a Happy New Year.